On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. Bob Newhart, beloved American comedian and actor, passed away peacefully from natural causes at the age of 94. Known for his dry wit, stammering delivery, and timeless humor, Newhart's death marked the end of an era in television and comedy that cherished understated brilliance over spectacle. His passing was not marked by tragedy or scandal, but by quiet reverence, a reflection of the values he embodied throughout his career: humility, intelligence, and kindness. Newhart rose to prominence in the 1960s with his Grammy-winning comedy album The Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart, which became a cultural phenomenon. He later found enduring success with sitcoms like The Bob Newhart Show and Newhart, where his everyman persona offered a comforting presence amid the cultural upheaval of the 70s and 80s. His humor, rooted in awkward silences and subtle absurdity, contrasted sharply with the louder, more provocative comedy trends of later decades. In this way, Newhart represented a bridge between mid-20th century sensibilities and the evolution of modern entertainment. The immediate response to his death was a wave of tributes from fellow comedians, actors, and fans. His influence was not only acknowledged, but deeply felt. Generations of performers cited him as a mentor and inspiration. Though his passing did not shift the political or cultural trajectory of the world in dramatic fashion, it brought renewed attention to the type of comedy that prizes intellect over insult, an increasingly rare art in an era of fast, viral humor. Bob Newhart's death amplifies his legacy by reminding us of the enduring power of gentler, smarter storytelling. It calls attention to a quieter kind of greatness, one that doesn't seek to dominate, but to endear. As tributes poured in, clips of his sketches and sitcom scenes resurfaced, becoming digital memorials shared across social media, evidence of how art sustains memory. In death, as in life, Newhart reflects how we cling to figures who offer levity without cruelty and insight without arrogance. His story underscores a core human desire to laugh at life's absurdities without losing our compassion. Through reruns, interviews, and archived performances, Bob Newhart lives on, not only as a master of comedy, but as a reminder that grace, in both life and death, leaves the deepest mark on our collective memory. Nico, born Krista Pefkin, died on July 18, 1988, at the age of 49 from a cerebral hemorrhage after falling off her bicycle while vacationing in Ibiza. Though her death was accidental and largely devoid of the glamour or spectacle associated with rock icons, it reflected the turbulence and decay that had long shadowed her life and career. A former model and actress who gained cult status as the haunting voice of the Velvet Underground and Nico, Nico had become a symbol of the 1960s counterculture, ethereal, mysterious, and tragic. Her death came during a period of quiet recovery. Having battled heroin addiction for much of her adult life, Nico had reportedly been sober for several years by the time she died. She was attempting to return to a more grounded existence, far removed from the glamorized chaos of the Warhol factory and her collaborations with Lou Reed and John Cale. The image of her cycling through the Ibizan sun, trying to live simply and healthfully, clashes poignantly with the fatal outcome. A jarring end for a woman whose life had always danced on the edge between beauty and destruction. The immediate aftermath of her death was relatively subdued in the mainstream press, reflective of her outsider status, even within the world of rock music. Yet within underground and avant-garde circles, her passing was deeply felt. For many, it sealed her legacy as a tragic muse, misunderstood in her time, yet influential to countless artists, musicians, and fashion icons who followed. Her death amplified the myth of Nico, the voice that sounded like winter, the face that launched 1,000 obsessions, and the spirit that never truly found peace. Nico's passing speaks to humanity's fascination with the enigmatic and the broken. We often immortalize those who seem to channel a deeper pain, using their art to expose wounds society would rather hide. In Nico's case, commemoration has come through tribute albums, documentaries, and recurring invocations of her stark, melancholic aesthetic. She is remembered not just for what she sang, but for what she represented, a raw, unfiltered confrontation with the self. Ultimately, Nico's death, and her legacy, reminds us that mortality often enhances myth. Through music, memory, and myth-making, we preserve those who reflect the contradictions of the human soul, fragility and defiance, despair and transcendence. Jane Austen, one of the most revered figures in English literature, died on July 18, 1817, at the age of 41. Her death was the result of a prolonged illness, likely Addison's disease or possibly Hodgkin's lymphoma, though the precise cause remains debated. In her final months, Austen's health deteriorated steadily. She experienced fatigue, weakness, and darkened skin, symptoms recorded in letters to family. Her brother Henry was by her side when she passed away in Winchester, far from her beloved home in Chawton. Her death was quiet, natural, and tragically premature, coming at a time when her literary talents were still blossoming. Austen's passing occurred during the Regency era, a time when women's roles were constrained and their intellectual contributions often overlooked or attributed to anonymity. Austen herself had published her novels anonymously, labeled only as "by a lady." That a woman could craft such sharp social commentary and psychological insight while remaining largely unseen in public life is telling of her time. Her early death not only deprived the world of potential future masterpieces, but also left her voice suspended in a world of transition between Enlightenment reason and the emerging romantic ideal of emotional depth. The immediate consequences of her death were understated. She was buried quietly in Winchester Cathedral, and only her family and a small literary circle understood the true depth of the loss. It was not until later in the 19th century, when her works were re-evaluated and appreciated anew, that Austen's genius gained widespread recognition. Her death, in retrospect, amplified her legend, casting her as a solitary, reserved genius whose life was as refined and subtle as the novels she left behind. Today, Jane Austen is immortalized through continuous adaptations of her novels, literary scholarship, societies dedicated to her work, and pilgrimages to her home in Hampshire. Her sharp wit and mastery of character have transcended centuries, suggesting that mortality cannot silence a voice so attuned to the human condition. Austen's death reveals a deep truth about how society often discovers the full weight of genius only in hindsight. We commemorate her not with monuments of grandeur, but through the lasting intimacy of her stories, where power lies not in spectacle, but in quiet observation. In remembering Jane Austen, we are reminded that the legacies which endure are often those born from restraint, nuance, and timeless human insight. Alex Rocco, best known for his iconic role as Moe Greene in The Godfather, died of cancer on July 18, 2015 at the age of 79. His death was the result of natural causes, following a quiet battle with the disease. Unlike the dramatic ends of many of his on-screen personas, Rocco's passing was marked by dignity and peace, surrounded by family and far removed from the gritty, violent world of mobsters and tough guys that he portrayed so convincingly throughout his career. Born Alessandro Petricone Jr., Rocco's early life bore shades of the criminal underworld he would later depict. Raised in Boston, he had brushes with gang activity before moving to California to reinvent himself. There, he shed his past and studied acting, eventually landing the role that would define his career. As Moe Greene, a brash, fast-talking Las Vegas casino boss, Rocco gave The Godfather one of its most memorable moments, a character whose arrogance led to his downfall in a single, shocking scene. The role cemented Rocco's image in the public eye and became a cornerstone of the American gangster film tradition. His death, while not headline news on a global scale, was deeply felt in Hollywood. Tributes from actors and filmmakers highlighted Rocco's versatility, professionalism, and warmth, traits often obscured by the rough-edged characters he played. His passing reflected a broader transition in Hollywood, the fading of a generation shaped by method acting, gritty realism, and the morally complex cinema of the 1970s. Rocco's legacy is preserved not only through film, but through the evolving portrayal of masculinity and power in American culture. Moe Greene became a symbol of hubris and the illusion of control, a man undone by his own bravado. In that sense, Rocco's most famous character became a cautionary tale woven into the fabric of cinematic history. His death reminds us how fictional roles can outlive the people who perform them, shaping cultural memory long after the cameras stop rolling. Through film, interviews, and retrospectives, Alex Rocco is immortalized, not just as a gangster, but as a man who turned a troubled past into a story of redemption and craft. His life and death echo humanity's desire to find meaning and transformation, to reconcile identity with legacy, and to preserve the complex beauty of those who dared to reinvent themselves. Tom O'Connor, the British comedian and television host, passed away on July 18, 2021, at the age of 81 after a long battle with Parkinson's disease. His death, while natural, carried the quiet weight of a man whose wit and warmth once lit up the living rooms of millions. A former teacher turned stand-up comic, O'Connor carved a niche in British entertainment through gentle humor and family-friendly television, becoming a household name during the 1970s and 80s with shows like Name That Tune, Crosswits, and The Tom O'Connor Show. O'Connor's passing reflected the changing face of comedy. His era celebrated clean, observational humor and good-natured banter, traits that sharply contrast with today's often edgier or more provocative comedic styles. His death symbolized more than the loss of a personality. It marked the fading of a particular entertainment ethos rooted in accessibility, community, and the unifying power of laughter. For an audience that grew up with him, his absence signaled the end of a more innocent age of television, where humor was designed to bring families together rather than divide. The immediate reaction to his death was one of warm remembrance. Fellow comedians and TV hosts paid tribute to his professionalism, charm, and ability to make people laugh without ever needing to offend. While his death did not shift the trajectory of British cultural history, it reignited appreciation for an era of broadcasting that prioritized connection over controversy. Tom O'Connor's legacy is preserved in the memories of viewers and the countless reruns of his television programs. His life reminds us that humor doesn't need to be loud or biting to be impactful. Instead, it can be kind, relatable, and enduring. His death invites reflection on how entertainers are often most deeply remembered not for groundbreaking controversy, but for the quiet, consistent joy they brought to everyday life. In commemorating O'Connor, we see how society honors those who represent warmth and continuity. Whether through televised archives, memoirs, or affectionate anecdotes shared by fans, his memory lives on, not in the grand upheaval of history, but in the smiles of those who recall a man who simply made the world feel lighter. His passing affirms that legacy is often built not in revolution, but in reassurance. Bernard Gerrodo, the French actor, director, sailor, and writer, died on July 18, 2010, at the age of 63 after a long battle with cancer. His death from natural causes, though expected due to his ongoing illness, resonated deeply within the French cultural community. Gerrodo had spoken candidly about his cancer, using it as a lens to reflect on life's fragility, and in doing so, he challenged societal discomfort with illness and mortality, particularly in an era that often prizes appearance, performance, and vitality. Once a naval officer, Gerrodo transitioned into film in the 1970s and quickly rose to prominence as a charismatic leading man. His on-screen roles ranged from swashbuckling adventurers to complex romantic figures. But it was his transformation later in life, from actor to introspective writer and advocate, that revealed the full scope of his artistry. Diagnosed with cancer in 2000, he turned to literature, writing essays and memoirs that blended personal suffering with philosophical inquiry. In a culture where vulnerability was rarely worn publicly by men of stature, Gerrodo's openness was both poignant and quietly revolutionary. His passing marked the end of a multifaceted career that bridged adventure, introspection, and art. Tributes poured in from across France, not only for his cinematic contributions, but also for his courage in facing illness with honesty and dignity. His death did not shift the trajectory of French history, but it did amplify his legacy, casting him not merely as a matinee idol, but as a thinker, traveler, and survivor who used his final years to explore the human condition in all its complexity. Gerrodo's death invites reflection on how we remember those who confront mortality with grace. Through his books, films, and public appearances, he transformed his illness into a form of creative resistance, rejecting denial in favor of depth. His legacy endures in French cinema, in his published works, and in the broader cultural conversation around illness and aging. In remembering Bernard Gerrodo, we are reminded that legacy is not only about brilliance in life, but also courage in facing its end. We immortalize figures like him through the stories they tell, the roles they inhabit, and the truths they leave behind, reminders that power and art lie not only in conquest, but in candor. Rebecca Schaefer's life and career were cut tragically short on July 18, 1989, when she was murdered at the age of 21 by an obsessed fan who had been stalking her. Her death was not only violent and senseless, but emblematic of the growing challenges surrounding celebrity, privacy, and mental health in the late 20th century. Schaefer was shot at her front door in Los Angeles, a brutal intrusion of violence into what should have been the sanctity of her home. She had been on the cusp of major stardom, known for her role in the sitcom My Sister Sam, and had just begun transitioning into film work. Her murder shocked the nation. It revealed the dark underside of fame, where adoration can curdle into obsession, and where the distance between fans and stars had been dangerously eroded by accessible public records and fan culture. At the time, there were few legal safeguards to protect public figures from stalkers. Schaefer's death, horrific in its intimacy, exposed a legal and social vacuum, catalyzing immediate calls for reform. The consequences of her passing were swift and significant. Public outcry led to major legislative changes, including California's first anti-stalking laws in 1990, the first of their kind in the United States. These laws were eventually adopted across the country and later extended to digital harassment as the internet age advanced. Her death fundamentally shifted how society understood the rights of public figures to personal safety and privacy, and how the law needed to evolve to protect them. Schaefer's story has become a cautionary tale and a call to action. While her name may not be as widely recognized today, her legacy endures in the legal protections she helped inspire. Her life and death are remembered through documentaries, advocacy work, and ongoing conversations about fame's psychological and societal costs. Rebecca Schaefer's death reminds us that mortality can become a mirror reflecting a society's failures and its potential for change. We immortalize her not through a vast body of work, but through the powerful reforms her tragedy made possible. Her story underscores how memory and mourning can fuel progress, and how even a brief life can leave an enduring imprint on the law, culture, and collective conscience.